that person is now no longer able to verbalize what their wishes are and what they were. And I don't want to say that it's not about that person, but this now becomes about how you are going to honor that person.
As a hospice aide and certified end-of-life doula, Cassidy Bastien is helping her clients and their families facilitate and provide meaningful after-death care. Hi, I'm Helen Bauer, and this is the Heart of Hospice podcast. The Heart of Hospice podcast is your source for compassionate and informative discussions about hospice and end-of-life care. I'm a certified hospice and palliative care nurse with over 15 years of experience. Whether you're a caregiver, someone with a serious illness, or you simply need to know more about hospice care, this podcast is for you. Join me as we explore all the aspects of hospice, from the details of caregiving to the emotional and spiritual dimensions of end-of-life journeys. For more resources and to connect with me, visit theheartofhospice.com and find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Keep listening for today's episode.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
This episode is sponsored by Hospice Navigation Services. When you need information about hospice, Hospice Navigation Services is here to help. An expert navigator will answer your questions about end-of-life care and give you the tools to feel confident in your decisions. A hospice navigation session is a great way to troubleshoot your current hospice care. It's your journey. We can be your guide. Visit hospicenavigation.com to schedule your hospice navigation session today.
My guest, Cassidy Bastien, is a certified end-of-life doula and a doula giver specialist. She's worked as a certified nursing assistant, a CNA, since 2003, and for 6 of those years, she proudly served as a hospice certified nurse's aide. Cassidy holds monthly death cafes, both in person and virtually, and she's a passionate advocate for caregivers. She's also the founder of the Caregivers Hub support group on Facebook, which welcomes thousands of members from around the world. You can connect with Cassidy at MyEOLNW.com, and that's N as in Nancy and W as in William.com. Cassidy shares a story with me about a patient that she connected with very deeply and how that led her to a deeper work as a death doula. She describes an after-death care kit, which I think is amazing. She helped develop this at an agency she worked with. It includes oils and lotions, a washcloth, and some legacy items. They were designed to help family and friends prepare the body to create legacy projects. We also talk about the unwillingness of some people to create an advanced care plan. Of course, that's a common theme on the podcast these days. Cassidy shares the most important thing she would tell families when their family member is on hospice. She describes the Caregiver Hub support group she started on Facebook. The group has a huge number of members. Any caregiver is welcome to join, and the mediators are all caregivers or recovering caregivers, a lot of them dementia caregivers. You won't want to miss this conversation, so stay tuned. There's a lot to learn. Cassidy, welcome to the Heart of Hospice podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here today.
We've already gotten to have a little chat, some of which we're going to repeat in a minute when we talk about the things we want to talk about. I'm so glad to have you on the show. Let my guests know about your work and hear about the things you're doing. So we're going to start out with a question from the End of Life deck. Whoop.
Love it.
It's too bad we're not doing video because what do you call that? Raise the roof?
That's a whoop whoop.
Yeah, we're raising the roof. So it's a card from the End of Life deck designed by my dear friend, my death sister, I guess we'd call her.
Yeah.
Lisa Paul, who's a hospice social worker. So these questions are designed for end-of-life workers to have some prompts and have conversations about end-of-life wishes and beliefs with folks who are looking at serious illness or terminal illness. So here's your question that I picked randomly. It's called Message from Beyond, and I like this one. If you could send one post-death message from beyond, what would you tell your family?
Ooh. So you know what? The first thing that came to my head, and I've kind of started to live by this philosophy. I am a music lover. I am the product of two hippies who followed the Grateful Dead around this country. And there's a Grateful Dead lyric that says, "All good things in all good time." And it's just a wonderful philosophy to live by. And I think that we get so caught up in the wanting, in the doing, in the I must, right? And sometimes that leads us to a place of, what's the word I'm trying to look for? It's not panic, but it's not present, right? It's not present moment. It's the searching, it's the scatterbrain, it's the hurry. And when I get in those moments in my life, I have to remind myself all good things and all good time. That that all of the things that I am working on or I'm searching for, that I'm doing, will come when it's time, and that I just need to let that go for a minute. So I think I would probably drop some Grateful Dead lyrics from the beyond and say all good things and all good time.
Well, I think
take a breath.
That's appropriate, right? You're talking about a post-death message from the Grateful Dead.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yep.
I like it. Okay. Cassidy, I got to tell you, first of all, thank you for being on the show. Out of over 200 guests, I have only talked to one other aide. And that's shame on me.
All right.
That's shame on me, right? Because we know that hospice aides, CNAs, are the workhorses of a hospice team. They have intimate relationships because they are performing care when a person is at their most vulnerable, and a lot of times at the most intense points of their illness, and also in the dying phase of things. Yes, most fragile. Yes. So thank you for the work that you do and you have been doing. So you've spent several years working with hospice patients as a CNA, and then you became an end-of-life doula. What caused you to move from working as an aide to deepening your work in end-of-life care?
Well, I mean, I always say no matter what avenue I take, I'm a caregiver at heart. I have just always loved taking care of people. And so I've been a certified nurse's aide since 2003. And the last 6 that I was out in the field, I left the field in 2022. The last 6 and all the way through COVID, I was outpatient hospice in the greater Seattle area. So that, assisted living, skilled nursing homes, that's private homes, that's every single situation you could ever observe other human beings as they are in their life, right? Yeah. When I first started with hospice, one of our clinical educators said, we serve everybody on hospice, even if they live in a van by the river. And so if that's what that means you show up, and that's where you go, and that's what you do. And I started end-of-life care, cutting my teeth in skilled nursing facilities from small town Montana to, where I started to greater Seattle area, which I call the Wild Wild West, because and I think home care is like that, whether you are, whether you're doing PT/OT or you are, end of life care hospice,
you never
have zero idea what you're walking into.
Absolutely
what's going to happen in a day. And then you got to figure that out. But end of life care has been with me since the beginning of my career as a caregiver and a certified nurse's aide. There's no way we work in long-term care and we don't care for people at end of life. And we all handle that differently in a skilled nursing setting. But the one thing that I did before I started as a CNA in my teeny tiny little town of Montana was I worked in the only 55 plus apartment building, which wasn't an assisted living, but they provided meals, right? So this was kind of the natural transition for our elders in our community, was to, once they're downsizing and getting rid of their homes, they're now coming to, it was called the Eagles Manor, and it still exists. And that's where they would go until they declined to the point where they needed to be in skilled nursing. So all through high school, I worked in the kitchen. And so this is kind of where I fell in love with our elders. And when I became a CNA at 18, at the only nursing home that we had in our town, I was now seeing all the people I had been feeding come in and need care. So I'd already known these people, right? I'd been feeding these people. And there was this man, and I'm a storyteller, so I'm going to tell you this story because it really is how I realized that there was something sacred to death and dying, and why this is my passion. There was this little Native man. There's an Indian reservation south of the town, primarily Chippewa Cree people, and he was in the at the Eagles Manor, and I would feed him dinner and breakfast and stuff. And he had one eye, but every morning and every night he would walk around that building. Didn't matter if it was 50 below, didn't matter if it was storming, if it was 105 degrees, he was out there trucking around this building. And I remember watching him through these big windows thinking, oh man, one false step and this guy is just gonna, because he was 92 or 3 at that time, or maybe even 96. But he did it religiously, and we kind of got in this non-communicative flow of, I knew what he wanted for breakfast. He always ordered the same things, so I would have these things prepared when he would come in from his walks. And then I started as a CNA and I started working nights, and all of a sudden here he comes. He's a resident now in the skilled nursing facility, and and now I'm in charge of giving him a bath, once or twice a week. And so and I was so excited to see him, as I was always excited to see them, right? Because I knew them and they were just part of my experience. And again, we got in a non-communicative flow of care. And one night he looked at me while I was giving him a bath with his one eye, and he said, I'm 100 years old and I'm going to be 101 May 22nd. And I said, awesome. That's so great. You do it, buddy. All right. And so here his birthday came. He turned 101, big celebration. And then he absolutely started to decline, and he started to move towards end of life. And that was just, I was now seeing this natural progression of what this looked like for this man. And I had performed, postmortem care on other people, but it wasn't somebody that I had a big connection with. And I didn't perform this man's postmortem care, but it was such a very pivotal moment for me. As he was active, he started to transition. We call that transition in the hospice world, where we're not actively dying, but we are moving towards actively dying. He was transitioning. And I had 5 or 6 days off, and I fully expected him not to be there when I got back. And so, when you're working nights as a certified nurse's aide, you gather up all of your linens and you go and you take care of all of your rooms and set your linens out and do all the stuff that you're going to need to prepare for your shift. And this was the first time I had seen somebody actively dying. And here he was beautifully positioned, bed to the floor with a chair sitting next to him. And I brought in the linens and I just sat next to him, and for some reason, I sat down and I took his hand and I said, "Oh my gosh, here we are. 101. You did it. You did it. You told me 6 months ago you were going to do it. And here you are." He hit 101 and that was it. So I just started to thank him for being kind, thank him for complying with care and not making it difficult, because that's the reality of the situation as certified nurses aides. We don't get to choose who we care for. We care for all people. And sometimes that's the combative, and sometimes that's the hard people that it's hard to take care of. So I was thanking him for that, and just holding his hand as he was actively dying there in that moment. And I just said, "I hope you have the best journey ever." And then I left and I went in the next room. And when I came out, there were 2 nurses aides walking out, and he had just taken his last breaths after I had said, "Have a good journey and goodbye and thank you."
Wow.
And that's when I realized there was something here. I wasn't afraid to sit next to him. I wasn't afraid to observe and be present with an actively dying person, to realize that those words meant more than I even understood. All of these years of non-communicative care, from feeding to bathing to, that there was something very, very sacred and important here. So that's what started my love for end-of-life care. And as I got out into outpatient hospice, I started to really see how unprepared we are for death and dying. And that we have people on hospice actively dying who are so unprepared, they're asking the certified nurse's aide about wills and stuff like that. And I've had to be multiple times as a certified nurse's aide out in the field in outpatient hospice, the one to have to inform families that their people are actively dying, that this moment is here, that we don't have a lot of time, that we are between 24 to 73 hours from end of life and death and dying. And it never felt good to have to, for lack of a better word, surprise somebody with that. I mean, you would think that, people are on hospice. Hospice means we're at end of life, but there are still surprises.
Sure.
Right? People are still shocked that this is moving this rapidly. And the joy that comes from those moments is educating them about that process and showing them what to do next and helping them understand what to do with these last 24 to 73 hours and what that can look like. From repositioning to oral care to soft music to essential oils, there's so much that can be done in those moments. And so that is why I transitioned into end-of-life doulaship, and I started to pursue that. And here I are.
Well, and the work that you're describing, teaching and guiding and supporting a family and letting them know this is what we see, this is what this means. That is doula work. That is not the work of an aide. So you're talking about much higher and deeper, much broader responsibilities. It's an amazing thing to be at the bedside and work as a doula, because the gifts and skills that you bring are so necessary. Most people have never had any experience. They've never seen someone die, maybe never seen someone die in the home, which is, the community-based piece. That's a big thing.
Right.
So you have something you call an after-death care kit. And I really want to talk
Yeah.
about this because I thought it was so cool. And look, I know you love talking about it too.
I do.
It's really a great thing for hospice teams to be able to use, for
Mm-hmm.
doulas to be able to use. And of course, families can do these projects
Yep.
and things like this without having anybody else to guide them, right? They
Right.
can DIY if they want to. But
Mm-hmm.
this after death care kit can
Yes.
include things like lotions and oils, and I'll let you tell more about
Mm-hmm.
it, but it's these legacy keepsakes.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, I want to know, where did you come up with this? What inspired you to put this stuff together? And how do you use them? What do they do for
Mm-hmm.
families?
Yeah. So I would like to say that I came up with this all on my own. But as always, when I was working as an aide in outpatient hospice, I joined an after death committee. And was our focus was how we look at after death and what can we do to make that more, not only more meaningful, but that encourages families to take an active participative role in that after death care. Um, and so we had, as a provider creating an after death care kit, we had partnered with a local lavender farm who already had products made, like their oils, their lotion, or their soaps. We as a team formed this kit, which was, working with our foundation to get the budget for the money to source the products. It was, our volunteers got on board and started hand knitting washcloths. So every single kit has a washcloth that goes into it that's hand knitted by our volunteers.
Mm.
And then the legacy products. That idea came from a social worker that was working with us, who loved doing legacy work with our patients on hospice. And so the kits that hospice uses has lavender oil. It has a lavender soap. It has a lavender sachet. It has a glass vial for hair, and it has a card with a beautiful saying about fingerprints, being lasting legacies. And each clinician has a uh, ink pad that they take with them. And they take as many cards as the family needs to take fingerprints and pass those out. They've gotten creative. They've used lipstick. They've used mascara. They've used eyeliner when their ink pads weren't working. Some people take the vials for the hair. Some people don't. And I kind of always have this I have this thing in life that when something is supposed to be, um, it will make its way. And I knew that working on these kits was really, really important, that this was not just that it was going to be more than just a service we're providing after death as a hospice provider, that this was going to allow families to reimagine what after death looked like for their people, and they have the tools to do that. And so before we even had all of the kits together, we just had a prototype. And of course, all of our clinicians were so excited about this kit that they were telling all of their families before we had kits together to be able to give out. And so as the universe and spirit works, I had 2 patients cancel in a day, and I got this call: Cassidy, there is there is a woman who just passed, and her daughter will not release the body until we do a lavender bath and she gets a lavender legacy kit.
Oh, talking about creating expectations there. Yeah.
Right. And so I worked with the manager. We got together this kit. I went and I grabbed it, and it was the pure proof to me that this was something bigger than myself, that this was bigger than just this kit. And so she had a young daughter, and she cared for her mother through all of her illness and all the way through her end of life. Um, but her father was a leather worker. So she wanted her mother's hair to be worked into a leather belt that her dad was going to create as a legacy item with her mother's hair. And her granddaughter was maybe 5, and she was in this little princess dress and this little wand, and she was on this stool, helping us provide this lavender bath and utilizing these soaps and all of these things, and taking fingerprints. And, it was kind of one of those things we weren't prepared for, but this was the direct impact of all of the work that we put into these kits. And this was, this is when I knew that once these, became mainstream as a part of our process and our after death, process in for this hospice, that it was going to just take off. And it absolutely has. Now everybody has legacy kits and lavender legacy kits in their cars, and families love them. And so any provider can do that. But also, end of life doulas, you can do the same thing. Source your items to create these kits for your people, because anybody can source these items. It doesn't always have to be with, a local farm, but it can be if that's the work you want to do and you want to make those connections.
Right.
And for families, I love the after death kit, but I also want to throw out this other thing and tell you a story about packing your suitcase. So the suitcase philosophy. I had a family. I had the daughter of a patient caring for her mom with Alzheimer's, and we were talking very, very much wanting to have conversations about what happens after death and what can this be and what can this look like. And so we started talking about these little things. This was before the legacy kits were ever. So I said, create a space for these things, like what you want to dress her in, because she wanted her mom to stay in her home for 24 hours after she died. She didn't want her mom to be embalmed. So I showed up one day, and there was this vintage suitcase by her mother's bedroom door. And she said, I got my suitcase. And I said, okay, well, when we were talking about packing a suitcase, I wasn't literal about it, but awesome. So next thing you know, she's got the dress that she's going to dress her in, and her stockings and her shoes and her Washington State University hat, her little 4-leaf clover pin. And so she just started to put everything that she wanted to do for her mom after death in this suitcase. And when the time came, I think it's important to note that when we are working in outpatient hospice care, we don't always necessarily get the privilege to be at the bedside when our people die.
True.
Our people sometimes die in the middle of the night, and the after hours nurses and care staff are the ones that show up to be with the family and do those types of things. It's not always your care team that is going to be the one showing up when your loved one dies on hospice. But I got a call after hours and they said, you're being requested. So I called the manager on call, and I asked if I had the approval to go out after my hours and provide after death care. And when I showed up, the room was full of kids and pets and all of her grandchildren, and there was music and there were dahlia flowers everywhere. And here her daughter had lavender essential oil. And so we bathed her and we dressed her as a family and all of the things that were in this suitcase. And she looked absolutely beautiful, and she had long gray hair, and we sprayed down her hair with lavender water, and we put them in pin curls. And
Nice.
she was there for a full 24 hours where her grandkids and great grandkids and her kids came. And so the suitcase philosophy, that's packing your bags. If you as a family, not as a provider, are going to assemble an after death kit, care kit, it should all be in one place so you can easily find it. That's just the best way to be prepared. But if you feel like you want to bust out a suitcase and you want to put everything in there, I think that you should. It's so that way when the time comes, you have absolutely everything that you need to provide the best after death care to your loved one that you can provide. So
if you have the luxury of time to put it together in advance, that's really a fantastic idea. And I want to clarify a term that you're using. You're calling it after death care. In healthcare, we have a more medicalized, sterilized term. We call it postmortem care. But it's the same thing. And I love the term of after death care. It's a much more human term. And the lavender oil and the soaps and the washcloth, a lot of people find great meaning in providing a bath. And the scent of lavender, I would think it's not just something nice to have as a send-off with your person, but also a scent that the caregivers can breathe in and experience as aromatherapy, basically, during the after-death care. I think that's a beautiful idea. I asked Cassidy what she wishes every family understood about death and dying after the break. Listen to her honest answer.
This episode is sponsored by Hospice Navigation Services.
If you or someone you care about is dealing with a life-limiting illness, you need a guide. Hospice Navigation Services is here to help you get the best end-of-life care possible. We understand the importance of personalized, experienced support. Hospice navigators provide one-on-one support over the phone or through video calls to guide you every step of the way. They'll answer your questions, explain what hospice care looks like, and give you the tools to feel confident in your decisions. Whether you're planning ahead or you have an urgent need, Hospice Navigation Services helps you and your family understand your options for end-of-life care. A hospice navigation session is a great way to troubleshoot your current hospice care and get answers to your questions. You don't have to go through this alone. You deserve compassionate support and guidance for your end-of-life experience. Hospice Navigation Services can be your guide. To book your hospice navigation session and receive your free guide to end-of-life care, visit our website at hospicenavigation.com. It's your journey. Hospice Navigation Services can be your guide. I want to talk about the vial of hair for a minute because I can see where people don't do that these days, but that long ago, that was a thing. They cut a lock of hair, and to keep a lock of hair was, especially for a child that had died, was a very common practice.
Absolutely. In fact, my father's mother, her family came from England. And when my grandfather died, I received a lot of those keepsakes that they had. And one of them was a picture of her grandmother and a locket of her hair.
Really?
So I actually do have those, and at the time I thought, what? Okay.
Yeah, that's creepy.
But it a little, but at the same time I was like, okay, here's this woman, I see her face, and this was the color of her hair. It was this beautiful auburn brown, and obviously she was young enough for it to not be gray. when she passed. But it was really popular in the Victorian era to utilize hair, especially in the UK as legacy items.
Yeah, it was
But
a keepsake.
a keepsake, memorial pieces, some of them were really ornate. So yeah, that's kind of where that came from. And the reactions to that are always a mixed bag. It's, ew, I don't want that. Or, oh my gosh, I'm going to have my dad put that in a belt with my mom's hair, like it runs the gamut.
Right.
And I think what's important, the important takeaway with that is the option is there if that is important to you.
Yes.
And if it's not, that's okay. So yeah, that's why the vial ended up in the kit.
So lavender is really a beautiful scent, but if there are people that don't care for that or they don't have access to it, what other essential oils or scented soaps have you seen that are nice to be able to use for after death care? If a family was putting this together on their own,
right,
what would you recommend?
So it's more than just an aromatherapy type things. There are lots of different scents that actually are very comforting and soothing for grief. And lavender is one of them.
Yes.
Bergamot, rose, sandalwood. I think yang is what they call it. So there are other options if lavender's not your deal.
Yeah. And bergamot is a more masculine scent.
It's a more citrusy type scent.
Yeah, and sandalwood.
Yeah, and sandalwood. And frankincense is also one of those. And in fact, I just had a family member in April lose her son to an accidental shooting, and I created an oil for her with all of those, the lavender, the bergamot, the rose, and the frankincense and sandalwood mixed with like a carrier oil that she could just dab on her wrists when she's in a deep moment of grief.
And so she's using that sort of as a legacy. Well, and the other thing is, again, if you don't have the luxury of time,
right.
Because even on hospice, deaths are unexpected, like you said. If they have a scented soap or a body wash that they've been using that was like their person's favorite, or something they've just been using and it was familiar, and they associate, that's even Dial soap or Old Spice,
whatever,
heaven forbid, but yeah. If that something that has a little bit of meaning, or connection,
all of it, nothing's off the table. Nothing's off the table. You can use, like, maybe there's a washcloth that you grew up with and it's still in your mom's closet when she dies. Use that washcloth. Use that towel. If she loved white shoulders, douse her in white shoulders, the Old Spice, whatever, favorite lotions, favorite soaps, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be aromatherapy, even though they're wonderful to have. It can be anything that's meaningful, because that's the point. This is a meaningful experience. This is the last time that you are going to have the privilege to care for that vessel before it goes on its journey and comes back to you as something totally different, or not come back to you at all, depending on what you choose as a means of disposition. So that's why, there's the provider legacy kit and how you do that. And then there's what you as a family member decide that you want to do for your loved one. But I also want to say, like, this starts with a conversation, right? This starts with a conversation with your person, if they're willing to have it with you. Is this what you want? Do you even want to be bathed? Do you want to be touched? What do you want?
What clothes do you want?
What clothes do you want? I had a VSED client wanted to go out in a Pearl Jam shirt, and she did. So it's just it starts with a conversation. When we have the privilege to be co-creators in our own experience, if we actually take the courage to have those conversations with our people, even when they don't want to have those conversations, because that's how we get till actively dying or have already passed without any wishes known, no funeral home chosen, no, and we see that every single day in hospice. We see people on service for years, should they continue to be eligible for services, and get all the way to that point and still not have making this choice.
For a caregiver, that's the difference between making decisions.
Right.
And that's a big deal for caregivers, because every day there are hundreds and hundreds of tiny little decisions. And then you get the big decisions: funeral planning, cremation, clothes, all of those things, disposition. And that is exhausting. That's why they call it caregiving burden.
Right.
So it's the difference between making a decision and following directions.
Exactly. And when it's all in place, it's so much. I always say it's the last gift that you can give your loved ones, is to have these things talked about, written down together, because in their most vulnerable and life-changing experience and grief, they no longer have to make those hard decisions or the minutia that's overwhelming. It's just there.
Yeah, and it may seem like tiny little things, but man, it builds up. And okay, so we understand that those conversations, a lot of times the person's not willing to have them. There isn't time to have them, or they have progressed beyond the capacity to have those conversations. So what do you tell caregivers if their person has dementia? How do you tell them how to create a legacy, the after death care kit? What do you tell them about having to pull it out of the hat and figure it out for themselves?
Right. Well, when we don't have the answers to the questions we need about final wishes, and we are tasked with now having to make those decisions, I always like to tell my clients and their families to think about that person and how they lived their life. Think about the things that mattered to them. Once you start thinking about that, maybe you do know what shirt you want to dress them in and out. Maybe you do know that they loved this perfume or this lotion or this thing, so think about what they loved while they were well and living their lives. And then you kind of have a foundation to start to build on, and making that the most meaningful thing, because that person is now no longer able to verbalize what their wishes are and what they were. And I don't want to say that it's not about that person, but this now becomes about how you are going to honor that person, because you are the one here left living that experience. So I don't ever want to say it's not about the person who's died and their wishes, because autonomy is incredibly important to me. And if somebody says to me they don't want anything, just throw the sheet over me and be done with me, I'm going to honor that. I've heard that.
I have too.
So, but if I don't know that, and here's this family who's struggling and wanting to deeply honor their person, this now becomes about them and how we are going to create that final moment for them that allows them to be at peace with their grieving and have the opportunity to grieve, to be able to make after death not so scary and make it palatable. Most people don't want to participate. They don't want to look. They don't, and our culture and our society has not done us any favors in cultivating that feeling around death and dying.
Sure.
But yes, it then becomes about the person. So I think it starts with thinking about who they were as they were living, what they liked, what they enjoyed, what they wanted to wear, what they wanted to smell like, what they wanted their hair to look like. Did they want lipstick? Always wore lipstick. All of those little things. If you don't have everything written down beforehand, that's your foundation to build on.
Yeah. There are ways of creating meaning, moments of meaning, even if your person said, just throw me in a ditch when I die. I have heard so many older men say that. And I have to tell you, that is not an advanced care plan.
I know.
It's not.
I know.
And whether it's denial or avoidance or whatever their motivation is for it, an inability or an unwillingness to have those deeper, really oftentimes very painful conversations.
Yeah.
Or they didn't feel like they had a close enough person.
Right.
Somebody they were comfortable. Yeah, they don't have a person to have those conversations with.
Right.
It's easier to make a joke than to say, I'm so isolated, I don't even have anybody that I'm comfortable saying these things to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I love that. There are so many ways to come at this, to create whatever the after-death care needs to look like. There are so many ways to create that. And the one you said where the woman you made the mixture of the oils for her to use and remember her son in a very loving way, meaningful way.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good thing for people to think about. Because again, even those deaths in hospice are unexpected. And there are accidental acute deaths, acute events that happen. Okay, if there is one thing that you wish every family understood about death and dying and after-death care before they needed it, what would it be? And you only get one.
Oh, that's so tough.
All the things you want to tell people and give people, all the tools. What would be the first thing you pull out of your toolkit?
Take the time. Take the time. This is time you will never get back. Ever. You will never get it back.
No, this is your moment.
The time. Take the time.
Yeah.
Before and after, take the time. Make the time. Sit down. Be present. And know that this is a sacred space. And this is time you will never get back.
Yeah.
So take the time.
Wise advice. Very wise.
Yeah.
Cassidy, how can we didn't even talk about your Facebook group, but we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. You're the founder of the Caregivers Hub support group on Facebook, which is a fantastic group. Tell me how the group works and who should engage with it.
All right. So the group is for anybody caring for another human being in any capacity, whether that is mentally, emotionally, or spiritually or physically. Because we have a lot of caregivers who place their loved ones. And we all know that when you place your loved one in a care facility, even though you're not physically providing the day-to-day care for that person, you still have to oversee that care. You still have to advocate for your person. And so that can also take a mental and emotional toll on family members who are no longer physically caring for their loved ones. So this is for anybody who, and I always say, once a caregiver, always a caregiver.
So recovering caregivers are welcome.
All caregivers are welcome, professional, family, however you're caring for somebody in whatever capacity, this group is for you.
Nice. So it's the Caregivers Hub support group. They can just search on Facebook for that?
Yep. The only thing I ask is that you answer all of the questions that we ask you, because my moderators absolutely, that's how we vet the people that come into our group. We are we have caregivers from all facets of life. We have people who are caring for people who weren't always kind to them. They were abusive to them. They've done things to them that, you would never think you would want to care for that person. But here people have found themselves in charge of caring for people who've done atrocious things to them.
Yes.
And they need a safe space. And so we don't censor colorful language. We do ask no politics and religion, just because we don't need life is hard enough as caregivers. We don't need to be at odds with each other over that crap. Let's just all come together.
Right.
And so that's how it started. That's why it exists, so that you have a safe space to say, I'm tired of this crap today. I don't want to do this. I've done this for 10 years. I've lost my spouse. I've lost my job, and I'm isolated in this house caring for this person, and I don't want to do it today.
Yeah.
And I'm done.
And your moderators aren't just social media managers.
No, they are caregivers, former caregivers themselves. All of them came to the Caregivers Hub support group when I started it in 2015 or 2016, because they were caring for somebody. And over the years, they've lost their people, but a lot of them caring for people with dementia, their loved ones with a dementia-related disease. And they are here making sure that we are all having this safe space to gather and share about all of the stuff and the things, because they needed that space too, and they found value in coming. They found support, and supporting their fellow caregiver is important to them, even though they're no longer caring for their people.
Yeah, it's meaning making. Cassidy, you've got a website as well. How can people connect with you through your website?
So you can go to myendoflifenw.com and you can find my website there. But I also encourage you to go to my social media platforms on Instagram and Facebook as well, because that is where I share my Death Cafe information. I hold a Death Cafe every single month, in person and virtually. So that's where the dates are and the location. We have found a home at our public library here that works for all of our people for in person. So that's where we reside now. But given the fact that I'm a busy bee, I don't always have it on the same day every single month. So, so tune into that. So that is My End of Life NW on Instagram and My End of Life NW on Facebook.
Perfect. Cassidy, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I love the legacy that you're creating.
Thank you.
Yeah, not an after-death legacy, but the legacy of work that you're creating in end-of-life care. It's great. Thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Thank you so much for having me and giving me a platform to encourage families to reimagine what after-death care looks for them and take an active participation in that.
Thanks for listening to the Heart of Hospice podcast. Check out our sponsor in the show notes and please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We would appreciate it if you would share this episode with your friends and family and anyone who needs to know more about hospice. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.